Today's story is so raw, it proves love can be more dangerous than any gunfight, set deep in the untamed Wild West. This is where winter bites hard, where forts stand tense against the unknown, and destiny waits just beyond the walls. It began with a single rider in the snow, a quiet arrival that would force a general's daughter to choose between safety and freedom. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The morning Eliza Kincaid's world cracked open began like any other winter dawn in the New Mexico territory. Quiet, bitterly cold, and buried beneath a fresh fall of snow that swallowed even the distant bugle calls from the fort's parade ground. She never meant to look outside. Steam from her morning tea had clouded the window pane, and when she brushed it clear with her sleeve, she saw him. A lone rider on a paint horse, still as if carved from the storm itself. The Apache stood roughly 200 yards from the fort's timber walls, his breath rising in pale, steady clouds. Dark hair fell loose past his shoulders, bound only by a simple leather band. Even from that distance, Eliza knew who he was. Kyle, the one they called the Snow Wolf. His name drifted through officers' quarters in hushed tones and trembled on the lips of new recruits during night watch. A warrior of the Red Mesa kin, whose raids had hardened into legend, whose mercy, when it came, was said to be rarer than rain in August. Her father, Brigadier Owen Kincaid, had spoken of him only once, over dinner. His weathered face had been tight with a respect he rarely granted any man, let alone an Apache. He fights like winter itself, he had said. Quiet, unstoppable, without mercy. But when he gives his word, he keeps it. That's what makes him dangerous. Eliza's hand trembled against the icy glass. She should have stepped back, drawn the curtains, returned to the safety of routine. Instead, she remained frozen, watching the warrior who appeared to be studying the fort with the patience of stone. Then his head turned. Across that impossible distance, through falling snow and pale morning haze, their eyes met. Eliza's breath snagged painfully in her chest. It was ridiculous. He couldn't possibly see her through the narrow window of the commandant's quarters. And yet, the weight of his gaze landed on her like a physical touch, warming her skin despite the cold seeping through the glass. He did not move. Neither did she. The moment stretched thin and fragile, like ice ready to crack, until a patrol rode out through the main gate. Hoofbeats and shouted commands shattered the stillness. When Eliza looked back to where the Apache had stood, he was gone, swallowed by the white expanse as if he had never been there at all. She stepped away from the window, her heart pounding hard against her ribs, stirred by something that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with a feeling she refused to name. Eliza. Her father's voice carried down the corridor from his office. Are you ready? The supply wagons leave in an hour. Yes, father, she called back, forcing steadiness into her tone. But the reflection staring back at her from the darkened mirror above the washstand betrayed the lie. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes far too bright. Her carefully pinned blonde hair had begun to loosen from its neat mourning arrangement. She looked like a woman who had seen something forbidden, or wanted something she should not. The second encounter came 3 days later. This time, there were no windows between them. Eliza was crossing the fort's central courtyard with an armful of linens bound for the infirmary, when a sudden commotion at the main gate drew every eye. 3 Apache riders entered through the timber arch, their horses' hooves ringing sharply against the packed snow. The Ironcoat Guard formed a loose perimeter at once, hands hovering near rifle stocks, though no weapons were raised. This was a parley, not a raid. Brigadier Owen Kincaid emerged from his office, his expression carefully neutral as he approached the riders. Two of them were strangers to Eliza, lean, sharp-eyed men who sat their horses with the easy confidence of those born in the saddle. But the third rider made her grip falter, and the linens slipped from her hands. Kyle. Up close, he bore little resemblance to the distant figure she had seen through the storm. He was solid, unmistakably real, his copper-toned skin marked by scars that spoke of battles survived. His features were sharp and proud in the winter sun. Buckskin leggings, a calico shirt beneath a wolfskin vest, and a worn knife at his belt told their own story. His long black hair was braided with strips of red cloth and silver beads that caught the light. He was striking in a way that made Eliza's chest tighten, and terrifying in a way that felt entirely justified. Her father was already speaking in measured, careful phrases, using broken trade language when needed. One of the warriors translated as necessary. The discussion turned around missing cattle, compensation, accusation answered by counter-accusation. Ritual words exchanged by men desperate to avoid bloodshed. Eliza should have gathered her fallen linens and gone on to the infirmary. Instead, she bent slowly to retrieve them, dragging out the task, her gaze lifting again and again to the Apache warrior who sat his horse like a king, surveying claimed ground. Then she made her mistake. She stood and moved past him toward the infirmary, close enough to catch the scent of sage and leather and something wild she had no name for. Close enough to hear his steady breathing. Close enough that he turned his head. Their eyes met for the second time, and Eliza felt the world tip violently out of balance. His gaze was dark as obsidian, deep as mountain water, fixed on her with a focus so complete it stole the air from her lungs. There was no threat in his eyes, no open hostility. But there was something else, something that sent heat coiling low in her stomach, while fear spiked through her veins in equal measure. Recognition flickered across his face, as if he had been expecting this moment, expecting her. Then, impossibly, Cale smiled. It was barely there, a faint lift at the corner of his mouth, gone almost as soon as it appeared. But his eyes held Eliza Kincaid's for a heartbeat longer, and he dipped his head in a gesture so slight no one else would have noticed. Not a challenge, not submission. Acknowledgement. A promise she could not begin to understand. Eliza tore her gaze away and hurried toward the infirmary, her face burning, her hands trembling so badly she had to pause at the door and steady herself before stepping inside. Behind her, she heard her father bring the negotiations to a close. Hooves turned. Riders departed. The fort gate shut with its familiar creak and heavy thud. She did not look back. That night, stretched out on her narrow bed while winter wind howled along the fort's walls, Eliza stared at the ceiling and tried to convince herself that what she felt was ordinary, sensible fear. The Apache were dangerous. Kyle was among the most dangerous of them. Of course she had been frightened. Except fear did not make her skin feel too tight. Fear did not replay a single glance again and again until sleep refused to come. Fear did not make her wonder what his voice sounded like, or whether his hands would be rough or gentle, or what it might feel like if... She pressed her palms hard against her eyes, appalled by her own thoughts. She was Brigadier Owen Kincaid's daughter. She had grown up on stories of raids and burned homesteads, of settlers driven off and women taken. She knew what the Apache represented, everything untamed, everything standing in defiance of the order her father was struggling to carve from this unforgiving land. She knew all of that with the rational part of her mind. But something deeper had awakened when Cale's eyes met hers. Something that did not care about danger, propriety, or the unbridgeable distance between their worlds. Something that wanted to see him again. The third encounter came when Eliza was alone, and it altered everything. 2 weeks passed after the parley, 2 weeks in which she threw herself into work with frantic determination. She helped Dr. Silas Boone in the infirmary, taught the enlisted men's children their letters, organized the fort's meager library, anything to keep her thoughts from circling back to dark eyes and a fleeting smile. Late one afternoon, she rode out to gather herbs from a grove near the river. She had done it countless times before, always within sight of the fort, always with the small pistol her father insisted she carry. The February sun was thin but welcome after days of cloud, and the melting snow fed narrow streams down the hillsides. She dismounted beneath the cottonwoods, tied her mare to a low branch, and began searching for wintergreen and sage. The work calmed her. The murmur of water over stone, the distant cry of a hawk, the wind threading through bare branches. Then her mare whinnied, not in alarm, in recognition. Eliza's head snapped up, her hand flying to the pistol at her waist. He stood at the edge of the grove, his paint horse grazing quietly behind him. Kyle. Alone with him, far from the shelter of the fort's walls, every sensible thought screamed at her to mount up and ride, to fire a warning shot, to do anything but what she did next, which was stand perfectly still, heart pounding like a war drum, eyes locked on his. He did not approach. Not yet. He remained 20 feet away, watching her with those impossibly dark eyes. He wore the same wolfskin vest, the same red-beaded braids, but she saw no weapons on him. His hands hung loose at his sides, his stance relaxed and ready. Silence stretched between them, taut as drawn wire. Then he spoke. His voice was low, rough, his English deliberate and careful. "Do you fear me?" It was a question, not a threat. Still, it shattered something inside her. Eliza tried to answer, to say yes, to say no, to say anything that might make sense of the storm in her chest. But no sound emerged. Her throat had closed, her breath coming fast and shallow, because the truth refused to be simple. Yes, she was afraid of what he represented, of what could happen to her out here alone with an Apache warrior, of the violence bound to his world. But she was also afraid of something else entirely. Afraid of the way her body reacted to him, heat flooding beneath her skin. Afraid of the desire she had denied for 2 weeks, the want that haunted her dreams and made waking hours a torment. Afraid that if he stepped closer, she would break. Some pieces driven by terror, others by a need so deep it frightened her more than any blade ever could. Kyle watched her silence, the conflict written plainly across her face. Something shifted in his expression. Not disappointment, but understanding. He took a single step toward her. Just one. And Eliza felt herself come undone. A sharp gasp tore from her chest. Her hands shook violently as heat and cold chased each other through her veins. She was trapped by his gaze, unable to move forward or back, every nerve screaming conflicting commands. Run, stay, speak, be still. Beneath the chaos, beneath fear and confusion, something else stirred. A reckless curiosity, a desperate need to understand what she was feeling, to understand the man who looked at her as if nothing else in the world mattered. She shivered, and it had nothing to do with the winter air. Kyle saw it all. She knew by the tightening of his jaw, the subtle change in his breathing. He looked at her like a man who wanted to close the distance, to claim something wordless and undeniable. But he did not. He stepped back instead of forward, his eyes never leaving hers, and in his face she saw it. Longing, yes, but also restraint. Honor. He would not take what had not been freely offered. He would not step across the boundary her fear had drawn. "When you know," he said quietly, "you will find me." Then he turned away, moving with an easy, unhurried grace back to his horse. He mounted without pause and rode off into the long shadows of the late afternoon. Eliza Kincaid remained rooted in the cottonwood grove long after he disappeared. The herbs she had gathered lay forgotten at her feet. Her hands pressed against her racing heart as she struggled to make sense of what had just occurred. She could not reconcile the fact that she had stood alone with Kyle, the snow wolf, the terror whispered across the territory, and he had done nothing but ask a single question and honor her silence. She could not deny the truth settling slowly, firmly into her bones. She had not wanted him to leave. The realization came in fragments over the days that followed, like ice breaking apart with the first thaw of spring. She wanted to see him again, had hoped for it, even while convincing herself she feared it. She found herself searching every distant rider, every quiet stretch of land, every lingering pause in the day. She had wanted him to stay, to speak again in that rough, careful English, to look at her with eyes that pierced past the general's daughter and found something unguarded beneath. She wanted to understand this impossible, irrational pull toward a man from a world so distant from hers, it might as well have been another country entirely. And Kyle, he had believed she feared him alone. That was why he had left. He had wanted her to recognize what he felt. Desire, recognition, something fierce and undeniable between them. But he had mistaken her silence for rejection, her trembling for refusal, instead of the battle raging inside her. Night after night, Eliza lay awake, staring at the ceiling, finally facing the truth she had been avoiding since that first morning at the window. She wanted to see him again. Not as Brigadier Owen Kincaid's daughter facing a dangerous Apache warrior, but as a woman meeting a man who made her feel alive for the first time in her carefully governed life. She wanted to know him, to understand what burned behind his gaze, to discover whether what she felt was real or merely a longing born of isolation and imagination. She wanted to answer his question. No, I do not fear you, at least not in the way he believed. But how could she find him? The territory stretched endlessly in every direction. She did not know where his people camped. Riding out alone would be madness, an invitation to capture, or worse. Her father would forbid it. The fort patrols would stop her. The answer came 3 weeks later, as winter finally loosened its grip. March arrived with warmth that turned snow into rushing water and frozen streams into living currents. The river near the fort swelled its banks, carving new channels and washing away old paths. It was dangerous and beautiful, alive with the return of spring. Eliza began riding out more often, always with a sensible excuse, gathering herbs, checking water levels for her father. In truth, she was searching, hoping that somehow Kyle would sense her change, that he would understand she had not found him yet because she could not because she did not want to. Late one afternoon, she found the place. Or perhaps it found her. A small clearing beside a fast-running creek, protected by canyon walls on 3 sides, warm beneath the spring sun. The water ran clear over smooth stones. Fresh grass pushed through the thawing earth in bright green patches. It felt hidden, private, as if time itself passed around it. Eliza dismounted, let her mare drink, then settled onto a sun-warmed boulder. She pulled off her boots and dipped her feet into the icy water. The cold stole her breath, sharp, exhilarating, real, and she laughed aloud. "You found me." His voice came from behind her, low and steady, warmed with something that might have been satisfaction. Eliza spun so quickly she nearly lost her balance and fell into the creek. Kyle stood at the edge of the clearing, his paint horse tied behind him, his posture open and unthreatening. But his His eyes burned with an intensity that left her breathless. She faltered, then steadied herself, found her courage. I wanted to. Why? He did not move closer, but every line of him was focused on her answer. Still afraid? Yes, Eliza said, because honesty was the only thing left to her. But not of you. Not the way you think. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. What fear, then? She could have retreated, could have hidden behind propriety and silence. Instead, she spoke from the raw place opened the moment their eyes first met. I'm afraid of what I feel when I look at you, she said. Afraid of wanting something I shouldn't want. Afraid of... She gestured helplessly, words failing her. This. Whatever this is between us. Something fierce flashed across Kyle's face. Triumph, recognition. He crossed the clearing then, moving with that same fluid grace, stopping close enough that she had to lift her chin to meet his gaze. You feel it, he said. It was not a question. Not only fear. Something more, she whispered. Yes, I feel it. I don't understand it, but it's there. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her face with calloused fingers. The contact sent a shock through her entire body. His thumb brushed her cheek with reverent care. I saw you, he said quietly. The first time. His English grew rougher, emotion tangling the words as he searched for them. I know, he said quietly. From window. I know then. He studied her face, his voice low and certain. You are mine, meant for me. There was no logic in it, no reason, only knowing. That's impossible, Eliza Kincaid whispered, yet even as she spoke, she leaned into his touch. Many impossible things are true, Cale answered. His other hand rose to cradle her face, holding her as though she were something rare and fragile. Me and this, he said, eyes locked on hers. You know it too. Why you come here? He asked. Why you not run when I speak? Why you shake? Not from fear, but from want. He was right. Heaven help her. He was entirely right. I don't even know you, Eliza said. Yet her hands lifted to rest against his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heart through the calico shirt. Then know me now. He leaned closer, his breath warm at her lips. I am Kyle, Chiricahua Apache, warrior, hunter. Enemies call me Snow Wolf. My people call me brother. I have 26 winters. I have killed men who tried to kill me. I have kept my word when it cost blood. I do not lie. I do not take what is not freely given. His forehead rested against hers, and Eliza closed her eyes at the intimacy of it. I see you, Eliza Kincaid, he continued, his voice falling to a rough whisper. I see you lonely in your father's fort. I see you strong, hiding strength. I see you wanting more than what you are given. I see you looking at me the way I look at you. Like we both finally see home. Tears slipped down Eliza's cheeks, because he had spoken aloud the truth she had been afraid to name, even to herself. She was lonely. She did hide her strength, afraid of being too much, too bold, too alive for the narrow life chosen for her. And when she looked at him, something inside her both softened and awakened. A paradox that made no sense, and all the sense in the world. This is madness, she whispered. Yes, Cale agreed. Good madness, right madness. Then he kissed her. It was nothing like Eliza had imagined a first kiss would be. There was no hesitation, no careful testing. This was hunger shaped into certainty, recognition given breath. Kyle kissed her like a man lost in the desert who had finally found water, like she was necessary, like she was everything. And Eliza, careful, composed Eliza, who had never broken a rule, kissed him back with a passion that stunned them both. Her arms slid around his neck. His hands circled her waist, pulling her close. The kiss deepened, turned molten, became claiming and surrender all at once. She tasted sage and smoke, and something wild and intoxicating. His hands moved over her back, her waist, her hips, with a reverence that made her feel both desired and cherished. When they finally parted, breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers again. "No more running," he said roughly. "No more denying." "No more," Eliza agreed, feeling the last of her resistance crack like ice under spring sun. "But what do we do? How can this possibly work?" "We make it work." His certainty was unshakable. "I will not let you go. Not now. You are mine, and I am yours. The rest, we figure out." It should have terrified her, this claim, this fierce devotion, this abandonment of reason. Instead, it filled her with a joy she had never known. "My father," she began. "I know your father," Cale said. "Dangerous man, powerful man, but I am dangerous too. And I fight for what is mine." His hands tightened at her waist. "You want me fight for you?" Did she? Was she ready to choose this impossible road? To let this Apache warrior upend her world? To risk everything for a bond she barely understood? Eliza looked into Cale's eyes, dark, fierce, burning with a fire that mirrored her own, and knew there was only one answer. "Yes," she said, "fight for me. Fight for us. Because I want this. I want you. More than anything I've ever wanted." Kyle's smile was brilliant, transformative. He kissed her again, slower this time, no less intense. Then he drew back, took her hand, and laced their fingers together. "Come," he said, "sit with me. Talk with me. Let me know you, and you know me." "We have time," Cale said quietly, "before you must return." They sat side by side on the sun-warmed boulder, the creek racing past them, and began the careful work of learning one another. Cale spoke of his boyhood, of tracking game across open land, of learning the shape of the world by reading wind and earth, of the stories Yana had told him about life before the white men came. Eliza Kincaid told him of losing her mother while she was still young, of growing up as her father's shadow across a string of frontier posts, of the books she loved and the hopes she had folded away beneath duty. They talked until the sun sank low, washing the canyon walls in gold and deep crimson. And when Kyle lifted her onto her horse and sent her back toward the fort, both of them knew it was not an ending. It was a beginning. The ice separating their worlds had started to give way, and what flowed in its place was something neither fear nor armies nor tradition could hold back. The days that followed became a study in divided lives. The woman Eliza presented to the world, and the woman she became in stolen hours with Kyle. Inside the fort, she was Brigadier Owen Kincaid's dutiful daughter. She poured tea for visiting officers' wives, managed the spring inventory for Dr. Silas Boone, taught reading lessons to the enlisted men's children. She smiled at the right moments, voiced the right concerns, kept the right distance. No one noticed the change beneath the surface. But beyond the fort, within the hidden clearing by the creek that had become their refuge, she was simply Eliza. Honest, unguarded, alive in a way she had never known. She met Kyle there whenever she dared, inventing ever more creative reasons to ride out alone. Sometimes they had hours, sometimes only moments. Each meeting tightened the bond between them, weaving understanding and longing with every shared word, every forbidden kiss. Kyle taught her how to read tracks in soft mud, how to tell deer from elk, How to know whether a predator was hunting or only passing through. His hands were steady as he guided hers, his voice low with quiet approval when she learned quickly. "You have good eyes," he told her one afternoon as they crouched beside the water. "Good mind. You see what is there, not what you expect. This is rare." "You sound like a teacher," Eliza teased, pleased despite herself. "My grandmother says this," he replied. "Everyone has gifts. Question is, do they find them? Do they let them grow?" He brushed her cheek with gentle fingers. "Your gift is seeing truth, not letting fear or other people's words make you blind." "Is that what drew you to me?" she asked, genuinely curious. "That morning, through the window, what did you see?" Kyle was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her as though committing her to memory. "I saw a woman trapped," he said at last. "Strong wings, cage too small. I saw loneliness, hunger for more, same hunger I carry." He hesitated, then added with plain honesty, "And I saw beauty that stole my breath." The raw emotion in his words tightened Eliza's throat. "I looked at you and thought, you are dangerous." "And I was," she added softly, "just not in the way I expected." "Dangerous how?" His thumb traced her lower lip, heat flaring in his gaze. "Dangerous because you made me reckless," she said. "Because you made me willing to risk everything for something I couldn't even name." She captured his hand and pressed it to her cheek. "You're dangerous because you showed me I've been half alive, and now I don't know how to go back." "Then don't," Kyle said simply. "Come forward. Come with me." "Where?" The question carried every meaning they both understood. "Anywhere," he said. "Everywhere." He drew her closer, resting his forehead against hers, the gesture that had become uniquely theirs. "My people move with the seasons, follow game, find good water, avoid soldiers." He spoke calmly, painting the vision with care. "We could go north, Montana, Wyoming, land so wide you ride for days and meet no one. We build a life there, hunt, shelter, freedom." It was a dream sketched in broad strokes, beautiful and impossible. "And my father," Eliza said quietly. "He'd send every soldier in the territory after us." "Let him," Kyle replied, without bravado. "Only certainty. I can hide where they cannot find, move faster than they can follow, protect you from what comes." "I don't doubt your strength," Eliza said carefully. "But is that the life you want? Always running, always hiding?" "And your people," she added. "Would they accept me?" These were the questions that haunted her in the dark hours before dawn, when reality pressed down like weight on her chest. They came from worlds not just different, but at war. Each day brought new reports of raids and retaliation, hatred sinking deeper into the land like poison. How could love survive in such soil? Kyle's expression changed, growing grave as he considered her words. "My people," Kyle said slowly, "some would accept you, some would not." He did not soften the truth. "Same as your people with me, maybe worse. But I am a respected warrior," he continued. "I have the right to choose my woman. If I bring you and say you are mine, most will accept you in time. And those who don't." His hand tightened at her waist. "I protect you from them as well." "Eliza," he said quietly, "you think I do not see how hard this is? That I do not know how many enemies stand before us?" He took her hand and placed it over his heart. "But I know this too. What is here, what we have, is stronger than their hatred, worth fighting for, worth any price." She wanted to believe him, wanted his certainty, his faith that love could overcome the impossible odds stacked against them. But she had been raised inside the military. She had seen what happened when people chose heart over caution, She had seen graves, women who trusted promises of protection and love that could not stand against reality. "I need time," she said at last. "Time to think, to plan. This isn't only about us. People will be hurt if we are careless. Your people. My father. And others," she added softly. "The fort depends on peace with the Apache. If the general's daughter ran away with a Chiricahua warrior, it could destroy everything he has worked for. It could start a war," she finished, "one that would kill hundreds." Kyle's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "You have a good heart. You think of others, not only yourself." "That," he said, and his voice dropped, "is part of why I love you." The word landed between them like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples in every direction. "Love?" Eliza whispered. "Yes." There was no hesitation. "I loved you from the first moment. Every moment since, I know it more." His eyes burned into hers. "You think I risk coming near the fort for anything less? You think I would dare steal away the general's daughter for anything but a love so full it steals my breath?" Tears slid down Eliza's cheeks, because she felt it too. This vast, overwhelming force that had grown between them faster than reason allowed. A love that felt both ancient and newly born, as though they had waited lifetimes to find one another. "I love you too," she said, the words pulled from someplace deep and unguarded. "I don't know how or why, but I love you so much it terrifies me." Kyle gathered her into his arms, holding her with a fierce, protective strength that spoke louder than any vow. They remained like that for a long while, the creek rushing beside them, the spring breeze carrying the scent of new grass and possibility. When they finally drew apart, Kyle cradled her face in both hands. "Then we find a way," he said. "No matter how long it takes, we find a way to be together." "Yes," Eliza said, and sealed the promise with a kiss that left them both trembling. But the world had no intention of granting them time. The first sign of trouble came a week later, when Eliza was summoned to her father's office with unusual formality. Brigadier Owen Kincaid was a man shaped by hard years on the frontier. At 52, his hair had gone more silver than brown, his face carved by sun, wind, and command. Yet his eyes were still sharp as broken glass, and now they studied his daughter with an intensity that made her straighten instinctively. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Eliza obeyed, folding her hands calmly in her lap, despite the anxiety creeping through her veins. "Is something wrong, Father?" "That depends." He leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "I've received troubling reports from patrols about a certain Apache warrior seen repeatedly near the fort, near the river." Her heart stumbled, but her face remained composed. "There are often Apache near the river. It's good hunting. This one," he replied evenly, "has been seen too often to be coincidence, always in the same area." His gaze locked onto hers. "The same area where you have been riding alone to collect herbs." A chill ran through her. Someone had noticed. Someone had been watching. "Father, He lifted a hand. "Before you speak, let me tell you what I know. Or rather, what I suspect." He rose and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "You are 22, Eliza. Intelligent, educated, far too spirited for the narrow life this fort offers. I have known that for years." This was not the confrontation she had expected. "I have also known," he continued, "that one day you would need more than I could give you here, that you would want a partner, a life of your own." He turned to face her. "What I did not anticipate was that you would find that man among the very people I am charged with containing." The breath rushed from Eliza's lungs. He knew. Somehow, he knew. "I haven't confirmed anything," Brigadier Owen Kincaid said into the silence. "But I'm not a fool, Eliza. I've seen the changes in you these past weeks. The light in your eyes, the color returning to your face. I've watched you slip away whenever duty allows. Always in the same direction. And I've received reports of the snow wolf lingering in places where he has no tactical reason to be." He crossed the room, his expression softening in a way she rarely witnessed. "I may be a soldier first, but I am still your father. So I'm going to ask you once, and I need the truth." His eyes held hers. "Are you involved with Cale?" The truth burned on her tongue, heavy, dangerous. She could lie. She should lie, for both their sakes. But she couldn't. "Yes," she said quietly. "I love him, Father. And he loves me." To her shock, the brigadier did not explode. Instead, he exhaled slowly and sat on the edge of his desk, suddenly looking every one of his 52 years. "I was afraid of that," he murmured. Then his voice hardened. "Do you have any idea what you're asking for? What this means?" "I know it's complicated," Eliza said. "Complicated?" He let out a bitter laugh. "Eliza, this isn't complicated. It's impossible. Kyle is Apache, a warrior who has killed American soldiers. And you are the daughter of the post commander." His jaw tightened. "If this becomes known, we've been careful. Careful doesn't matter." His voice rose, then steadied with visible effort. "Even if I wanted to give this my blessing, which I don't know if I can, it would destroy you both. You would be shunned by every respectable household in the territory. He would be hunted by men who already want him dead, and you would live as outcasts, targets on your backs. Better that," Eliza said fiercely, surprising even herself, "than living half a life without him. Father, what Cale and I have, it's real. It's the realest thing I've ever known, and I can't walk away just because it's inconvenient or scandalous." The brigadier studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Sadly. "You have your mother's spirit," he said softly. "She said much the same when I warned her that marrying a career soldier meant a life of hardship on the frontier." He shook his head. "I thought I could spare you this, loving someone who would bring you nothing but difficulty. Apparently, I failed." "You didn't fail," Eliza said, standing to face him. "You raised me to be strong, to think for myself, to recognize truth when I see it." "And what truth have you recognized?" he asked. "That love doesn't care about borders or bloodlines, that some bonds defy reason, and that I would rather face hardship with Cale than comfort without him." Silence stretched so long she feared she had pushed too far. Then the commander straightened, his officer's mask sliding back into place. "This is what will happen," he said firmly. "You will not see him for 2 weeks. No rides to the river, no secret meetings. You will remain within the fort and think carefully about the choice you're making." "Father." 2 weeks, he repeated. "If, after that time, you still feel the same, we will speak again. I will not allow you to decide something this grave in the heat of passion. You will give yourself time to be certain." It was far more lenient than Eliza had any right to expect, and they both knew it. "And if I'm still certain?" she asked. His expression was grim. "Then I will help you. Not because I approve, I don't, but because you are my daughter, and I love you, and because I would rather you run with my knowledge than without it, where I can offer no protection at all." Hope flared in Eliza's chest. "You mean that?" "I am a man of my word." He moved to open the office door, ending the conversation. 2 weeks, Eliza. And know this, I'll be increasing patrols near the river. If Kyle is wise, he will stay away." As Eliza walked back to her quarters, her thoughts raced. 2 weeks felt like an eternity, but it was also a gift, a chance to plan, to prepare, to make the impossible somehow possible. She only prayed Cale would understand why she could not come, why no word or explanation would reach him. She prayed he would trust her absence did not mean abandonment. She prayed he would wait. But hope, Eliza would soon learn, was fragile in a world shaped by violence and misunderstanding. The attack came on the 9th day of their forced separation. Eliza was in the infirmary, helping Dr. Silas Boone inventory bandages when the first shots rang out. Sharp, unmistakable rifle fire. Screams followed from the direction of the main gate. "Stay here," Dr. Boone ordered, grabbing his medical bag and rushing toward the door. And in that instant, Eliza knew. The fragile balance holding their worlds apart had finally shattered. But Eliza Kincaid had been raised inside frontier forts. She knew that sound the instant it split the air. She didn't need anyone to tell her what it meant. Raid, attack, battle. She ran to the window and stared out into chaos. More than a dozen warriors from the Red Mesa kin had breached the outer perimeter, slipping through under cover of a supply wagon's arrival. They moved fast and clean, not charging blindly, not slaughtering. This wasn't a massacre. It was a calculated strike. They were after horses and weapons, nothing more. But even precision unraveled when frightened men began firing. Eliza watched, frozen in horror. She saw Lieutenant Warren Pike raise his rifle at a warrior cutting tack from the corral fence, saw the Apache twist aside, return fire, saw Pike collapse into the dust. More Iron Coat Guard poured from the barracks, forming firing lines. The raiders began to pull back under the storm of bullets. And then, she saw him. Kyle came over the rear wall like a shadow made flesh, landing in the courtyard with fluid, deadly grace. His attention wasn't on the fight. It was on the infirmary. On her. He had come for her. In the middle of gunfire and shouting and blood, he had come for Eliza Kincaid. Their eyes locked across the turmoil, and she understood everything in a single heartbeat. Desperation. Resolve. Love strong enough to drive a man into hell. She was already running, leaving the infirmary, ignoring Dr. Silas Boone's shouts behind her, ignoring the bullets, the screams, the danger. She had to reach him, had to stop this before someone killed him. "Eliza, get down!" Her father's roar stopped her mid-stride. She turned and saw Brigadier Owen Kincaid emerging from his office, pistol drawn, his face stripped bare of command and replaced with raw fear. He saw Kyle. He saw his daughter. He saw an Apache warrior and the child he loved running straight toward him. Time slowed. Kyle saw the brigadier, saw the gun, saw Eliza frozen between them. The brigadier saw duty and fatherhood collide. Eliza saw the truth with terrifying clarity. Someone was about to make a choice that would destroy everything. "No!" she screamed. She threw herself forward, placing her body between Kyle and her father's weapon. "Don't shoot! Please, don't shoot!" "Eliza, move!" her father shouted, his voice breaking. "I won't!" She spread her arms wide, shielding Kyle with her own body. "I won't let you kill him." Around them, the fight was collapsing. The raiders were already disappearing back over the walls, their mission abandoned or completed. Soldiers were converging, drawn by the standoff. Seconds remained, only seconds, before Cale would be surrounded, taken, or executed. He knew it. Eliza saw the calculation in his eyes, the warrior's instinct weighing impossible odds. Yet he didn't flee. He only looked at her, with such aching devotion it shattered her. "Go," she pleaded, tears streaking her face. "Please, Cale, go before they kill you." "Come with me," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, loud enough for her father to understand exactly what this was. "Come now. We run, we vanish, we build a life, together." Behind her, she heard the unmistakable click of her father cocking the pistol. Heard rifles lifting. She had seconds. Stay, and keep the life she had always known, or leave, and lose it forever. Eliza met Kyle's gaze and found her answer waiting there. She turned to her father. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it with every part of her soul. "I love you, but I love him more." Then she ran. Kyle's arm locked around her waist. He lifted her with practiced strength, slinging her over his shoulder as if she weighed nothing. The world she knew shattered as he carried her toward the wall. The last thing she heard before Kyle vaulted the timber barrier was her father's voice. Broken. Raw. "Let them go. Stand down." "That's an order. Let them go." The first night was the hardest. Kyle ran with Eliza as if death itself chased them. His strength never faltered as she clung to his back. Beyond the fort's sightline, he retrieved his paint horse, swung her up behind him in one smooth motion, and drove the animal north at a relentless lope. They vanished into the mountains, following paths only Apache knew. Deer trails, dry creek beds, hard stone ridges that left no tracks. Kyle rode with the certainty of a man who had spent. Kyle moved through the land as if it lived inside him. Every ridge, every cut of stone, every bend in the canyon was familiar to him, as personal as the scars on his hands. Eliza clung to him, her arms burning from the strain, her cheek pressed against his back. She breathed in the sharp scent of sage, leather, and sweat. She did not cry, though the urge tore at her chest. She did not look back, though her heart ached for the father she had left behind and the life she had abandoned. What she had done could not be undone. There would be no returning, no softening of the choice she had made in full view of soldiers and firelight. She was the brigadier's daughter who had fled with an Apache warrior. A scandal. A betrayal, some would say. And she would do it again. Kyle's heartbeat was steady beneath her hands. His voice murmured reassurances in his own language, words she did not understand, yet felt settle deep in her bones. They stopped only when darkness made further travel too dangerous. Kyle chose a narrow canyon, sheltered by stone. He built a small fire beneath an overhang, shielding the flame with care, feeding it dry wood that gave off little smoke. "Here," he said softly, handing her dried meat from his pack. "Eat. You need strength." Eliza accepted it numbly, exhaustion dulling her senses. When she tried to stand, her legs shook from hours in the saddle. Kyle steadied her, guiding her gently onto his bedroll. "We are safe tonight," he said, pulling a blanket around them both. "Tomorrow we ride again, to my people." Safe was a relative word, but she did not argue. She leaned into his warmth and finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what she had done. "My father," she whispered. "Did you see his face?" Kyle's arm tightened. "I saw. He is strong. He could have killed me. He did not." "He told me he would help us," she said, a sob breaking loose. "I don't think he meant like this." "No," Kyle said quietly. "But he is a soldier. He knows sometimes the battle comes before you are ready." "I hurt him," she said. "So badly." "Yes, and he will carry that pain." Kyle turned her face toward his, firelight reflecting in his eyes. "But you gave him something too. You showed him his daughter is brave, that she can choose her own path." She traced the line of his jaw. "How are you so certain? You're only 26. "We are taught early that life is short," he said. "That choices matter. We learn what is worth fighting for." He kissed her palm. "You are worth all of it." Eliza kissed him then, pouring gratitude, fear, love, and resolve into that single connection. Cale answered with warmth and restraint, his touch reverent, grounding her rather than claiming her. When they finally parted, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "We should sleep. Long ride tomorrow." "I know," she said, though she did not want to close her eyes. She needed this to be real. "Kyle," she whispered, "I don't want to wait anymore." His gaze darkened. "You are sure? This is not fear speaking?" "I'm sure." Her voice did not waver. "I chose you." She swallowed. "I want to be yours. Completely." His hands framed her face, trembling. "You already are, as I am yours." What followed was gentle and earnest, unhurried and imperfect in the way first moments always are. Kyle was patient, murmuring words that made her feel treasured beyond measure. When they finally rested, wrapped together beneath the stars, the fire burned low above them. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None," Eliza said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," he echoed, drawing her close as sleep finally claimed them. They reached Kyle's encampment late the next afternoon, and for the first time, Eliza saw the truth of the life she had been taught to fear. The camp was smaller than Eliza had imagined. No more than 15 wickiups stood along a narrow stream in a high mountain basin, sheltered by pine-covered ridges. Thin columns of smoke drifted from cooking fires, and the scent of roasting meat made her stomach tighten despite her nerves. Children splashed near the water, women worked hides and wove baskets, and men tended horses or shaped tools. It looked ordinary, like any small community, until they arrived. Conversation died as Cale rode in with Eliza behind him. Faces turned. Eyes widened. Eliza felt the full weight of those stares as Kyle swung down and helped her dismount. Rapid Apache filled the air, tones sliding from curiosity to sharp disapproval. She kept her spine straight, refusing to show the fear creeping up her back. An older woman stepped from one of the larger wickiups. Her face was weathered and strong, her hair streaked with silver. She walked straight to Coyle and spoke quickly, her words clipped and forceful. Coyle answered calmly, one hand resting on Eliza's back, both shielding her and presenting her. Others gathered, adding their voices as the exchange heated. At last, Cale lifted his hand for silence. He spoke in Apache first, then turned to English so Eliza could understand. "This is Eliza," he said, his voice carrying authority. "Daughter of the soldier chief at the fort. More important, she is my woman." A ripple passed through the crowd. "I claim her before you all," Cale continued. "She left her people to be with me. Left her father, left safety, left everything." He drew her closer. "She is brave. She is worthy. She is under my protection." The older woman fixed Eliza with a hard, measuring stare that made her want to step back. Eliza did not. She met that gaze and held it. "I am Yana," the woman said at last, her English heavy with accent. "Kyle's grandmother. You bring trouble to our camp, white woman." "I know," Eliza answered honestly. "And I'm sorry. But I love your grandson, and he loves me. I will work hard. I will learn your ways. I will earn my place. I'm not asking for favor, only a chance." Yana studied her for a long moment, then spoke a short sentence in Apache that drew laughter from several onlookers. Kyle broke into a grin. "What did she say?" Eliza asked, nerves fluttering. "She says you have a spine," Kyle translated, amused, "and that I have always liked difficult things." He turned serious. "She allows you to stay. Others will decide in time whether you belong. For now, you are a guest under her protection." It was not warmth, but it was more than Eliza had dared hope. She bowed her head respectfully. Thank you. The weeks that followed reshaped her life. Eliza learned to build fires that left almost no smoke, to cure hides without wasting a scrap, to recognize edible plants and healing roots. The work was relentless. Her hands blistered and split. There were days she fought tears from sheer exhaustion. There were also moments of quiet wonder. Sunrise washing the peaks in gold, and rose while Kyle waited with her clothes. Laughter shared with women when words failed and gestures took their place. Children who first hid from her, then watched her, then finally tugged at her sleeves with shy smiles. And always there was Kyle, patient teacher, fierce protector, devoted lover. He showed her his world with pride, guiding her through mountains he had known since boyhood, teaching her to read the land as something alive, something that spoke if you listened. But peace never lasts on borrowed time. The soldiers came on a cold morning in early May, when snow still streaked the high ridges and meltwater roared through the streams. Eliza was gathering roots near the edge of camp when shots cracked the air. Warning fire, not aimed. She looked up to see Kyle running toward her, his face set. "Soldiers," he said. "Your father leads them. White flag. They want to talk." Her heart sank. She had known this day would come. She had only hoped for more time, to prove herself, to belong fully, to make leaving impossible. "What do we do?" she asked. "We talk," Kyle said. "You stay behind me. I speak first." The delegation entered the camp. Brigadier Owen Kincaid, 2 officers Eliza recognized, and a scout who looked deeply uncomfortable. Her father's face was iron discipline, but his eyes found her at once, and something in him fractured. "Eliza," he said hoarsely, "are you hurt? Has he—" "I'm fine," she cut in, stepping from behind Kyle despite his warning hand. "I'm here by choice. I'm staying by choice." "You don't understand the hardship, the danger." "I understand exactly." She moved to Cale's side and took his hand openly. "I love him. I'm happy here. I'm not coming back." Her father's jaw tightened. He looked at Cale with a mix of grudging respect and raw fury. "You've taken my daughter," Brigadier Kincaid said, "turned her into a fugitive, given her a life of suffering." "I gave her a choice," Cale replied evenly. "I gave her truth. I gave her love that does not cage her." The question struck home. Brigadier Owen Kincaid flinched, then seemed to age several years in the space of a breath. "No," he admitted quietly. "I can't say the same. I thought I was protecting her by keeping her close, by narrowing her world." His jaw tightened. "All I really did was push her toward the first man who offered her freedom." He turned back to Eliza. "I didn't come here to drag you home. You're a grown woman. You've made your choice and I have to respect that, even if it tears me apart." Cale felt Eliza's fingers tighten around his. "But I did come to warn you," her father continued. "Warn me?" Eliza asked. "There are men in this territory, bounty hunters, opportunists, men who thrive on hatred," Brigadier Kincaid said grimly. "They see you as a prize, the general's daughter who ran off with an Apache warrior." Eliza's stomach dropped. "They're already talking about raiding this camp," he went on, "dragging you back for your own good, collecting a reward I've been pressured to offer." "You offered a reward?" The hurt cut deep. "I refused," he said firmly. "But others have put up money anyway, enough to tempt desperate men into doing something stupid." His gaze swept the camp. "You're not safe here. Neither of you are." Kyle answered coldly. "We can move, go deeper into the mountains, places they cannot reach." "For how long?" the brigadier countered. "A year, 5, the rest of your lives?" He looked back at his daughter. "Eliza wasn't raised for a life of constant flight. She'll need doctors someday, supplies, stability, a life that's more than hiding." Then what do you suggest? Eliza demanded. That I leave Cale? That I go back and pretend this never happened? No. The single word stunned her. I suggest you run, her father said. Both of you. Get as far from New Mexico as you can. Go north. Montana, Wyoming. Land so vast no one will bother chasing ghosts. He exhaled slowly. Build a real life, a homestead. Neighbors who don't know your past. Start over. It was more than Eliza had ever dared hope for. And you? She asked softly. What happens when they learn you helped us? Brigadier Kincaid gave a sad smile. I'm retiring next year anyway. Planning to head east, live with my sister in Boston. Let them court-martial an old man if they want. His voice roughened. I've given enough years to the Army. I want to spend the rest knowing my daughter is alive and happy, even if she's far away. Tears spilled down Eliza's face. She released Kyle's hand and stepped into her father's arms, holding him fiercely. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. I don't understand, he murmured into her hair, but I love you. And sometimes loving means letting go. He pulled back. Take care of yourself. Then he fixed Kyle with a hard stare. And you, protect my daughter with your life, or I'll come back from the grave to haunt you. I protect her with my life, Cale said without hesitation. Always. Satisfied, the brigadier reached into his coat and produced a heavy leather pouch. It's not much, but it'll help. Supplies, maybe land if you're careful. Father, I can't. You can and you will, he said, pressing it into her hands. Consider it your inheritance, given early. His voice softened. Write to me when you're settled, if it's safe. Let me know you're alive. I will, Eliza promised. I love you. I love you too. He kissed her forehead and turned away before his composure broke, mounting his horse and riding off with his escort. Eliza watched him go, feeling an entire chapter of her life close. When Cale's arms wrapped around her from behind, she knew another was beginning. One she would write herself. They left the camp 2 days later, with only what 2 horses could carry. Yana brought supplies and her blessing, pressing bundles of dried herbs into Eliza's hands while speaking rapidly in Apache. Kyle translated, barely holding back a grin. She says these are to make babies strong. He lifted another bundle. And these are to keep a man vigorous. She says I will need them to keep you satisfied. Eliza flushed crimson as Yana laughed, her eyes bright. Then the old woman cupped Eliza's face in her hands, her voice careful but warm. You are brave, yellow-haired woman, Yana said, her voice rough but steady. You are good for my grandson. You make him smile in ways I have never seen. She held Eliza's face between her palms, studying her with sharp, knowing eyes. You take him north. You build a life. You make children. Be happy. We will, Eliza promised, emotion tightening her throat. Thank you for letting me stay. Not let at first, Yana said with blunt honesty. But I watched you. How you work. How you learn. How you love him. She nodded once. That makes you Apache in the heart, even if not in the blood. Good enough. The journey north took weeks. They followed game trails through high country, skirted settlements, avoided patrols, and moved fast when they needed to. They traveled light, hunting, fishing, sleeping beneath open sky or in shallow caves when storms rolled in. It was hard. There were days Eliza's muscles burned and nights she cried quietly from exhaustion and homesickness. But there were also moments of pure wonder, watching an eagle spiral overhead while Kyle explained its meaning, washing in a clear stream while he kept watch, and then joined her, laughter echoing off stone. lying together under a spill of stars so bright they felt close enough to touch. With every mile, they built something. Distance from their old lives, closeness in the new one. They found their place in late summer, in Montana Territory, where mountains opened into wide valleys rich with grass and timber. An abandoned homestead sat there, likely a prospector's dream left behind. The cabin was small but solid, with a stone hearth and a roof that needed only modest work. A creek ran clear nearby. Meadows offered pasture. Forest pressed close for hunting. Kyle studied it with the same calm focus he once used on battlefields. Good water, good game, defensible, far from towns, private. It's perfect, Eliza breathed, not for what it was, but for what it could become. They spent autumn readying for winter, mending the roof, hauling supplies from a distant trading post where they passed as a trapper and his native wife. A pairing common enough not to draw attention. Eliza learned skills she'd never needed before. Smoking fish, banking a fire to last the night, curing hides and stitching them into warm clothes. Kyle taught patiently, often showing her Apache ways that were simpler and more efficient than the methods she'd known. They built a life piece by piece. It wasn't always easy. Differences sparked disagreements, misunderstandings flared. But they learned to talk, to bend, to laugh at themselves when pride got in the way. Beneath it all was love, deep, steady, growing stronger with every shared sunrise and hard-won task. Winter came hard in Montana. Snow fell early and stayed late, piling high against the cabin and turning the world into a vast white hush. Inside, there was warmth. Kale hunted even in deep drifts, kept them stocked with meat and wood. Eliza learned to cook over the hearth, make soap and candles, and turn rough walls into a place that felt like home. They talked through the long nights, about everything and nothing. Kyle taught her more Apache words and stories from his childhood. Eliza read aloud by firelight from the few books she'd carried, watching his face as new ideas took hold. They learned each other slowly and completely, with a tenderness that made the cold seem distant. "Are you happy?" Kale asked one night, holding her close beneath layers of fur while the fire crackled. "Happier than I ever imagined," Eliza said. "I miss my father sometimes, and books, and music." She smiled softly. "But I don't miss that life. Not really. This," she gestured around the cabin, "this is real." "Real is good," Kyle murmured, kissing her temple. "Real is us. Everything else is extra. Nice, but not needed." "Exactly," she said, turning to face him. "There's one more thing I've been thinking about." "What thing?" She took his hand and set it gently on her still flat stomach. "A child. Ours. Someone to share this life we're building." Kyle's eyes widened, then filled with fierce joy. "You want this? You are ready?" "I want it more than anything," Eliza said. "I want a child with your eyes and my stubbornness. I want to teach them to read and to track, to love both our worlds. I want a family with you." He answered by kissing her deeply, then pulling back just enough to speak. "Then we make a baby, tonight, and every night until it happens." Eliza laughed, bright and free. "That's your plan. Just keep trying?" "It is a good plan," Kale said solemnly, eyes dancing. "I am a thorough man." "I've noticed," she replied, smiling as he pulled her close. She gasped as Kyle's mouth brushed her throat, his hands roaming with unmistakable intent. What followed felt different from before. Still fierce, still intimate, but threaded with purpose and hope. They were no longer just two people reaching for comfort or desire. They were choosing something larger, setting the first stones of a future meant to last beyond them both. Spring arrived late but dazzling. Snow loosened its grip, and the land remade itself. Wildflowers spilled across the meadows, aspens unfurled bright green leaves, and the creek thundered with meltwater. Eliza planted a garden using seeds she'd carried from New Mexico, blending them with wild plants Coyle identified as useful or edible. They added a tool shed, a small barn for the horses, and a smokehouse for preserving meat. The homestead took shape as a true home, marked by touches of them both. Eliza's books lined a shelf near the hearth. Kyle's finely made bows and arrows hung with care on the wall. A carved wooden chest held keepsakes from both their pasts. People passed through now and then. A trapper, a family headed west, a hunting party with whom Kyle carefully set peaceful boundaries. Mostly, though, they lived in a solitude that felt less like isolation and more like sanctuary. Their nearest neighbors lived 15 miles away. Harlan Crow and Elma Crow, who had homesteaded the year before. They were kind, practical people who asked no questions about Cale's heritage or Eliza's refined accent that didn't match her work-worn clothes. They accepted that the young couple up the valley worked hard and kept to themselves, and on the frontier, that was enough. "If you folks need anything, just holler," Harlan said one early summer day when he stopped by to borrow an axe. "We look out for each other up here. Winters are too hard to do otherwise." "We appreciate that," Eliza said warmly. "And the same goes for you. I have medical supplies if you ever need them, and Cale is an excellent hunter." "Noted and appreciated, ma'am," Harlan replied, tipping his hat to her and nodding respectfully to Kyle before heading off. No prying, no judgments. Exactly the kind of neighborliness Eliza had hoped for. Their child arrived in late winter, nearly a year after they'd left New Mexico. Eliza's pregnancy had gone smoothly, though the isolation weighed on her as the time drew near. Elma had promised to come when labor began, but a blizzard swept in 2 days before, sealing the trails and leaving Kyle to welcome their child alone. Eliza would remember that night in fragments. Cale's calm, even as fear flickered in his eyes. The Apache prayers he murmured, words of respect he'd learned young. The steady strength of his hands as he supported her through each wave of pain. And then, his voice, thick with awe, announcing, "A son. We have a son." The boy arrived healthy and loud, a shock of dark hair and eyes that would someday settle into a shade between his father's deep brown and his mother's blue-gray. Cale cleaned him with gentle efficiency, wrapped him in soft doeskin, and placed him in Eliza's arms with reverence. "Perfect," he whispered, looking at them both. Both perfect. They named the child Rowan Kincaid, honoring Eliza's roots and her father. Kyle also gave him an Apache name, Tarek, for the way he arrived swiftly during a snowstorm, as inevitable as a winter slide. "He will be strong," Kyle said, tracing a finger along the baby's tiny cheek. "He will know both worlds, belong to both, be trapped by neither. This is the gift we give him." Eliza agreed. Rowan would learn to track and hunt from his father, to read and reason from his mother. He would grow up with Apache stories and English books, frontier skills and thoughtful questions, a living bridge between worlds. Elma arrived 3 days later, once the storm passed. She brought food, steady hands, and warm praise. "He's beautiful," she said, assessing mother and child with practiced eyes. "And you did well," she added to Cale. "Not many men could welcome their own child without a doctor or midwife." "Apache women often do," Cale explained, "and Eliza is strong." "Strong, yes," Eliza said dryly, smiling despite herself. "Easy? Not quite." Elma stayed 2 days, helping Eliza recover and sharing practical wisdom books never quite cover. When she left, She pressed a small bag of coins into Eliza's hand. "From Harlan and me, for the baby. Get something nice when you reach the trading post." "We can't accept this," Eliza protested. "You can and you will," Elma said kindly but firm. "That's what neighbors do. You've got a good man and a beautiful child. Let folks celebrate that with you." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Acceptance, welcome, a place to belong, proof, at last, that they had found a place where they could simply be a family, without the weight of old histories pressing down on them. As Rowan grew, so did the homestead, and so did their quiet happiness. Kyle added one room to the cabin, then another, until the rough shelter became a solid house, fit for years ahead. He built furniture with skills learned from watching white carpenters, adding uneven touches that made every table and chair unmistakably his. The garden spread wider each season, yielding vegetables they could dry and store for winter. Chickens came first, then a cow, each step bringing them closer to true self-reliance. Eliza taught Rowan to read before he turned 4, using the books she had carried from New Mexico, and others gathered during rare trips to distant towns. She told him stories of her childhood, of his grandfather, Brigadier Owen Kincaid, of the life she had walked away from, and why she had chosen this one instead. "Because love matters more than comfort," she told Rowan, when he asked why she had left a grand fort for a small cabin in the mountains. "And because your father showed me that being yourself is better than living by other people's expectations." Kyle taught their son to track by 5, to shoot by 7, to think like a hunter, and move with the awareness of a warrior of the Red Mesa kin. But he also taught restraint, how to approach animals without fear, how to take only what was needed, how to give thanks for every gift the land offered. "You are both Apache and white," Cale told Rowan solemnly. "That means you see 2 paths, understand 2 peoples. You use that to build bridges, not walls. Different is not the enemy." Rowan absorbed it all with the ease of childhood, becoming exactly what his parents had hoped for. A boy at home in both worlds, fluent in Apache and English, as comfortable tracking elk through timbered slopes as he was reading Shakespeare by firelight. Eliza kept her promise to her father, sending letters whenever travelers passed through who could carry mail. Replies arrived slowly, sometimes months later. But they came. Brigadier Owen had retired and moved east, living quietly with his sister. His letters carried news from Boston, careful questions about his grandson, and restrained expressions of pride. "I will not pretend I understand the life you chose," he wrote once. "But I hear happiness in your words, and that is what a father wants for his daughter. You chose the brave road, not the easy one. I am proud of you." He sent gifts when he could. Books for Rowan, fabric for Eliza, and once a finely made rifle for Kyle, sent from one warrior to another, with respect. Kyle treasured it not for its use, but for what it meant. Acceptance from the man who had every reason to despise him, and recognition that he had kept his promise to protect and cherish Eliza. When Rowan was 5, word arrived that Brigadier Owen had passed peacefully in his sleep. Eliza mourned the father she had loved, disappointed, and finally made proud. She took comfort in knowing they had reconciled, that he died knowing she was happy, and his grandson was being raised well. "He was a good man," Kyle said, holding her as she cried. "He gave you strength and honor. Those live in you, and in our son. He is not gone while we remember." Life settled into rhythms as steady as the seasons. Winters kept them close to the cabin. Summers stretched across the valley. Spring and fall were for planting and harvest. They made friends slowly. Other homesteaders, Crow families who camped nearby during hunting season, traders passing through. Some people stared at them. The refined white woman, her Apache husband, the mixed-blood child who spoke both languages without effort. But on the frontier, survival outweighed prejudice. The family in the mountain valley caused no trouble and asked for none. There were hard years. One winter when snow piled so deep they nearly starved before spring. A summer when white raiders, outlaws, not Indians, tried to steal their horses, and Cale was forced to kill 2 men defending their home. A spring when Eliza fell ill with fever and hovered near death for 3 terrible days before breaking through. They survived every trial together, emerging stronger and more tightly bound. And there were moments of simple joy. Rowan's first successful hunt. The way Kyle still looked at Eliza across the table as if she were the only woman in the world. Evenings spent reading, telling stories, or sitting together in companionable silence. This was the life they had fought for, the life they had risked everything to claim. And it was good. One summer evening, when Rowan was 8, the family sat on the porch Kyle had built, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. "Tell me the story again," Rowan asked, as he often did, "about how you and Mama met." Kyle and Eliza shared a glance, smiling like 2 people who had lived a great adventure together. "Your mother was the general's daughter," Cale began, his English smooth after years of use. "Living inside a fort, behind walls, and I was a warrior, free, but alone. One winter morning," Eliza continued, "I saw a man on a painted horse watching the fort. I should have been afraid. But instead I felt something I couldn't name. Recognition?" Cale said softly, taking her hand. "We recognized each other before we ever spoke." "Soul knows," Eliza added, smiling. "And then what happened?" Rowan asked, even though he already knew every word. "We were both foolish and brave," Eliza Kincaid said plainly. "We chose each other when it made no sense, when everyone said it couldn't work. We ran together, built this life, and made you." "And you're happy?" Rowan Kincaid asked. "Even because it was hard," Cale replied. "Especially because it was hard. Easy things don't last. What you earn through struggle, through choosing and refusing to quit, that has weight." "Your father's right," Eliza added. "We've faced trials, but every morning I wake beside him. Every day I watch you grow strong and kind. I know we chose well. Love isn't always gentle, but it's always worth defending." Rowan nodded, taking it in, then broke into a grin. "When I'm grown, I'll find someone brave like Mama and strong like you, Papa, and I'll choose them, no matter what anyone says." "That is a good plan," Kyle said, pride warming his voice. "But for now you are young. You have time to learn, to grow, to find who you are before you decide who to walk beside." "And meanwhile," Eliza said, standing to ruffle Rowan's dark hair, "you'll help your father with the horses before dusk, and I'll finish supper." As Rowan sprinted for the barn and Cale followed at an easy pace, Eliza stayed on the porch, taking in the life they had shaped. The solid house, the thriving garden, the horses grazing the meadow. Beyond the things she could touch were the things she could feel. A love that survived impossible odds, a family formed against expectation, a happiness carved from hardship. That first morning long ago, she had denied what she saw in the Apache's eyes. The pull, the recognition, the promise of change. But not for long. In choosing to face it, to claim it, to fight for it, she found something greater than comfort or approval. She found home, not a point on a map, but a belonging. Not a rule kept, but a love deep enough to remake 2 lives and bring something new into the world. Kyle stepped from the barn and caught her gaze, smiling in the fading light. He said something that made Rowan laugh, then turned toward the house. Toward her. Eliza waited, heart full, grateful for the courage she'd found at that window years ago, and for every hard choice that led to this quiet perfection. "What are you thinking?" Kyle asked, drawing her close. "That I'd choose it all again," Eliza said simply. "Every frightening, wonderful, impossible moment. I'd choose you 1,000 times over." "Only 1,000?" He feigned offense. "I would choose you infinitely." She laughed and kissed him, tasting sage and smoke. Home. Infinite, then. As the sun sank behind the Montana mountains, streaking the sky with gold and crimson, the family gathered for supper. The general's daughter turned homesteader. The Apache warrior turned husband and father, and the child who carried the best of both worlds. They had shattered expectations, broken rules, defied predictions, and built something beautiful from the fragments. This was their story, their truth, their hard-won ending, kept alive by love. Dear listener, tonight, as Cale and Eliza's story settles into the quiet places of your heart, hear this. You're allowed to rest. You've spent years being strong for others. You were the steady hand when the ground shook, the answer when questions crowded in. Somewhere along the way, you learned to carry weight so well you forgot you were holding it. Here, just for this moment, you can set it down. Eliza didn't find freedom in a castle or an easy life. She found it in a small cabin, in calloused hands, in simple joys. Peace isn't having everything. It's wanting what you already hold. Tonight, look at your life, with its rough edges and quiet corners, and whisper, "This is enough. I am enough." What sets you apart from the young isn't speed or fire. It's knowing that love isn't always lightning. Sometimes it's the steady warmth on your face, the comfort of a familiar chair, coffee made just right, rain you don't have to hurry through. These aren't small things. They're treasures. And if you've loved and lost, if the chair beside you is empty, know this: love doesn't vanish. It lives in you, as constant as your breath. Kyle and Eliza built happiness together, yes, but they also built it within themselves first. That kind of happiness can't be taken, not even by death. As you close your eyes tonight, feel this: you are protected. Not from every hardship, wisdom knows better, but by the truth that you've survived every hard day so far. By experience, by scars that healed, by victories that carried you here. Tomorrow can wait. Tonight is for peace. Tonight is for remembering that you don't always have to be Eliza Kincaid, racing toward the unknown with your heart in your throat. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be still, to allow quiet to wrap around you and hold you steady. Sleep well, dear soul. You have earned every moment of rest. And when morning comes, as it always does, you will rise again, not because you owe proof to anyone, but because that is the way of those who endure. They rest, they heal, and they rise with gratitude for having lived, loved, and carried on. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Your presence means more than you know. If today's story awakened something inside you, don't let the trail end here. There are many more tales of courage, devotion, and faith waiting to be discovered. Subscribe, comment, share, and come back as we continue this unforgettable journey. Thank you, truly. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: all stories are intended solely for entertainment and may include fictionalized scenarios or dramatization derived from historical contexts. While AI assists in production, human creators supervise and adjust every piece to maintain sincerity, credibility, and emotional quality. We adhere entirely to platform regulations regarding AI content, ensuring no deepfakes or misleading portrayals. Licensed materials are used responsibly. Republishing, modifying, or extracting content without authorization is not allowed. We appreciate every viewer who respects originality and creative effort.